Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton,
I'm Bob Scarborough.
and we are
Uh,
the FAIRtax Guys,
da,
coming
da,
at
da.
you on the FAIRtax official Facebook page and our FAIRtax Guys YouTube channel. And it's not live stream, but we're on Rumble as well. If you want to go check out the Rumble archive, if you miss one of these shows and you want to go back and look at it, and I would suggest that if you want to go back and look at one, go back a couple of weeks and catch the one that we did with Steve Hayes when he's going over the Moore decision, the Supreme Court case on the taxation of unrealized income. So there was a lot of misunderstanding about what that was all about, and Steve was able to come on and clear most of that up for us. So I suggest you go back in the archive and check that one out if you haven't seen it already.
Please do. And please subscribe to our channels wherever we might happen to be. Follow us on social media, the YouTube channel, subscribe there. Ring the little notification bell so you know that 8 p.m. on Eastern time on Tuesdays. We have a new episode dropping every week there. And all of our followers that are out there, please share it with your friends and neighbors, your neighbors' friends, your family. And this is a decisive time in our country's history, not only politically, but financially. I mean, we're sitting on a mountain of debt. And I, for one, believe that implementing the fair tax will put us in at least a better position to start wringing out some of the massive debt that we're under. And
Yes.
it's going to be generations as it is to kind of clean up all the extra money that's out there and the inflation that's going on sustained, even though, a lot of people say, hey, we got a pretty good economy, but you know what? There's still 34 plus trillion dollars out there that we're indebted to,
Yeah.
that isn't good. It's not good. Now
Ah,
that
yeah. Mercy. I'm hot. I got used to that cool Alaska weather up there. Now I'm back in Florida and I'm burning up. Oh well. Let's get on with our FAIRtax Power Radio as we continue to go through the FAIRtax book. But as always, when we do not have a guest on the program, or our first order of business is to look at congress.gov. Again, we put the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes in the search bar at the top of the congress.gov page and hit the go button. And as of the date we're recording this, 1,690 hits on that search at congress.gov, including this little gem, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to make certain provisions with respect to qualified ABLE programs, make those certain provisions permanent. That is S 4539 from Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri. But that again illustrates something that we are constantly talking about here on FAIRtax Power Radio as to what's wrong with the current tax code. Never stays the same. They've got these certain provisions that'll be in effect for a while and then they'll expire. And of course, we're seeing this now with the Trump era tax cuts. They're going to expire if they don't get renewed. So the tax code is constantly changing because they keep putting all of these temporary provisions in them. And then you see bills like this one that say, oh, we like those, let's make them permanent. And then they do that. And then the next Congress down the line says, I don't like that at all. And they strike it completely. You just can never have any stability at all in the income tax code. It's amazing.
I think that
Had you completely speechless there for a while, huh?
trying to process all of this, it's like, we have better, honest to goodness, we have better things to do with our time than worry about the taxes. Let's live our life. The opportunities are there, and we always say this, that we as citizens in this great country, can't remember. We were not here when there was no tax code, when there was no income tax. And now we have an opportunity to actually put something in place that allows us to live like our great great grandparents did, and our great grandparents, those folks who lived at the turn of the previous century knew what it was like, and there was tariffs and other things that allowed the taxes to operate the government have been collected. We're not in the business at the FAIRtax for figuring out how much should be spent and on what. All we're doing is working on making sure that it's collected. The money is collected to run the government in the most efficient, fair, simple manner as possible and transparent. And
Indeed.
the FAIRtax puts us in charge, takes a little bit of the responsibility off of those hardworking representatives that we have to be concerned about how the money is raised. And I think past time.
Guess what I found here?
Okay.
Another tax credit. HR 8719. This is kind of a scattershot thing to amend Title 18 United States Code to require a federal firearms licensee to provide secure firearms storage information to a prospective firearm transferee. In other words, if you buy a gun, the gun store has to tell you how to store your firearm safely. And here's the rest of it. To amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to provide a gun safe credit and for other purposes. I do have a gun safe. I wonder if that means that that I can get that credit if HR 8719 eventually becomes law. That's a Representative Cheryl from New Jersey.
You need to work on that one. That sounds pretty. That sounds like you might be able to get a few $100 credit there. Sure.
Oh, I don't know. Let's move on because again, we got another chapter of the FAIRtax book to discuss here in a moment. This is HR 8682 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to expand the exclusion for certain conservation subsidies to include subsidies for water conservation or efficiency measures, stormwater management measures, and wastewater management measures. Golly, you can't have a tax code without that, can you?
No, I wouldn't think that. I'm sorry that they waited so long to get it put in there.
Yeah. So again, the tax code is just constantly shifting. They had these exclusions, and now Representative Huffman of California here wants to expand these exclusions. And then I guarantee somebody on the other side of the aisle is going to want to reduce those exclusions. And then a future Congress is probably going to want to get rid of them entirely. And it's just, if you have to laugh. If you don't, you'd have to cry at just what's going on with our tax code and just how incredibly stupid it is that these things just continue to happen, and we the people just sit idly by. Most of them don't pay any attention because we watch the Congress critter because most other people don't, and they get away with all this stuff because nobody else is watching what they're doing and calling them on it. So I got one more here.
Yeah, go ahead. Go. No, I was just going to make, but I can wait till after you're done.
Okay, one more. This is HR 8635 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to double the value of certain tax benefits relating to children and dependents. Again, they're going to change the tax code, and somebody, Representative, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Molinaro of New York. This is his bill to double the value of certain tax benefits, and somebody else is going to want to cut them in half. And again, somebody else is want to get rid of them. And there's no text in here, so I can't tell you which certain tax benefits they're talking about. But again, it's up and down, back and forth, in and out. The tax code is just constantly changing as far as what's counted as income, what's not counted as income, the size of your benefits, who gets the benefits. It's just insane that we have a tax system like this, and we need to get rid of it all and replace it with a fair tax. Now you may proceed.
Only thing I was going to say is, over the last decade or so, we have become more tech savvy than we were 20 years ago, for example. So here we go with all that's happening in the world. We have the ability to get instant news on this device right here, whether it be finance or entertainment or news about what's going on in our area. We have the ability to educate ourselves more efficiently and more immediately than we did 15 years ago. When the computers became the phone, when everything, computing devices became transistorized enough to fit in our pockets, we're now able to educate ourselves on what's taking place in a lot of different areas, and related to our finances. We know about things that are going on that we might not have been totally aware of over a decade ago. We now have the ability to find out what has taken place in Washington, D.C., and what the heck have they been doing up there, since I started voting them into office, back in the mid 70s or 80s. And
Yep.
now see as consumers, there's a lot of shenanigans going on up there, and we're darn well, waking up to that now.
All right. I tell you, yes, you need to look at congress.gov every week, put the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes up there in the search bar, and see what you get. If you do that, as of the date we're reporting this, 1,690 hits, and that's just looking at legislation in the current Congress. It's amazing what they've done. All right, we need to move on here on FAIRtax Power Radio as we are continuing our trek through the original Forts and Linder White FAIRtax book. We are now up to chapter 10. The Underground and Offshore Economy, Taxed at Last is the name of this chapter. And you hear a lot, Bob. You hear a lot of folks talking about, especially folks on one particular side of the aisle, about how people need to pay their fair share. Now, that's usually applied to high income individuals, and it's usually applied to corporations and stuff like that when people are saying they need to pay their fair share. Nobody seems to ask. I bet you, if you're dealing heroin or you're dealing cocaine and stuff on the street corner, you make it a pretty good living, and it's all cash. And
Right.
there's no track. How many people that are making their living in that way are standing under a red light on the porch of your house? Now, how many people that are making their living that way, or how many people that are doing landscaping or other kinds of service things like that, say, "Hey, I'll give you a discount if you'll pay me in cash"? How many people like that do you think are actually reporting all of that cash that they're making on a 1040 form? I got a hint for you. It's probably pretty close to zero.
Yeah. I mean, not all, but some, and we'll talk further, and everybody that's listened to the program or watched the program over the years know that the drug dealers, prostitutes, cash economy, underground economy, illegal aliens, undocumented workers, all have to go buy stuff at the grocery store, or they all have to go get the oil changed in their car, or they've got to buy a vehicle. Yes, you can go buy a car today and walk into the dealership and plop down a giant bag of money, either in the form of an official check or into a black duffel bag, and transact business. But
Yeah.
nowhere is that individual that's engaging in commerce that way. You don't know if he's going to go over here at the end of the tax year and submit all that information and pay taxes on all that money that he has in cash, maybe buried in the behind the sheetrock in the walls of his living room.
Now, I just thought of somebody else who is not paying their fair share of income. Your favorite person from Publication 17, the guy who steals his neighbor's lawnmower and does not return it, is required under the current federal tax code to report that as income if he does not return it in the tax year that it was taken. And I bet you I'm going to run for office, and my plan is lawnmower thieves have to pay their fair share of taxes. And the current income tax code is not going to get the job done, but the fair tax will.
But I turned that lawnmower back in before the end of the year, so it was out of my possession by the 31st of December, et cetera. So for those of you who are just joining us and you have no idea what we're talking about, Publication 17 is the compendium from the Internal Revenue Service that goes in excruciating detail, line by line, form by form, of how to fill out your taxes. So there's a here about if you sold drugs, you need to report it, the income on your taxes. If you borrowed, in quotes, your neighbor's lawnmower and didn't return it by the end of the year, you need to pay a tax on the use of that lawnmower. And since it's in your possession, the value of same has to be reported on on your taxes. And it's all in publication 17. And, we sit here and we go down this dark road every week. And the bottom line is, folks, it doesn't have to be that way. And as we're talking about the FAIRtax and inside the FAIRtax book, plenty of information that will arm you with details. Detail.
Yes.
If you listen to the newscast, and I'll wrap this up, I'll be done. If you listen to the newscast and you hear people talking about the FAIRtax or tax on consumption, 9.5 times out of 10, it's going to be, it's an extra tax on top of everything else. And a lot of people are just going to go, well, I don't need that. But you got to dig in. And this is what we're hopefully helping you do here on the program with the FAIRtax book analysis that we're doing.
Okay, there was something here in the FAIRtax book that I didn't know. That's on page 92, at least in the white paperback version. He said the ancient Greek knew the truth 2,000 years before the American Revolution. The great philosopher Plato wrote in the Republic. Now, I was not really a scholar of the ancient Greece here, but Plato supposedly wrote in the Republic during the 4th century BC. This is quoting him. Where there is an income tax, the just man will pay more and the unjust less on the same amount of income. So true to Plato's wisdom, Americans have lived off the book since we imposed the income tax. Of course, in the beginning, the income tax was a very small percentage on just the very richest people, and folks didn't have a real problem with it. But it was only when the income tax started to affect nearly every American, the burden on high achievers became particularly onerous, that schemes for tax evasion proliferated. So failure to report your income if you're earning it on the street corner in cash, or you claiming credits that you're not entitled to, all this kind of stuff, any kind of system. Unfortunately, you're going to have people that are going to take advantage of the system, and this is something that people have told me before. They feel perfectly justified in doing it because they just feel like the government's trying to screw them in every opportunity. So they're just going to try to resist and fight back. And it's some people consider it their moral obligation to cheat on their taxes because of the way the government does them to start with. And all of this results in the fact that, excuse me, almost $1 trillion a year is owed but not collected under the income tax system. And the FAIRtax would reduce that to, it would reduce evasion by about 95%. If you believe this study that came out a few years ago that was written by a professional CPA, because the FAIRtax would reduce evasion by pretty much 95%. Because all of these people that are currently not reporting income that they buy things and they become taxpayers. And if they're not legal residents, I'm not sure we've really mentioned this last week when we talked about the prebate. Prebate only comes to legal households. So if you're in this country illegally, you don't have a valid Social Security number, you don't get the prebate, which means that you're going to be paying the tax on every dollar you spend and not just on your spending above the poverty level. But that's just crazy.
Well, and it also includes, we talk undocumented workers, illegal aliens, whatever label you want to put on that particular category of consumer, because they do consume when they get into this country. They are making transactions at different levels, but also international travelers who come into our country for pleasure or business. They are in the same consuming category, generally speaking, that we all are in when we go buy something from the grocery store, or we're filling our gas tank up, or we're renting a motel room on a vacation, or buying clothing or anything like that, or a new home. Right. International travelers, whether for business or pleasure, can also contribute to the revenue coming into the Treasury with the FAIRtax. Doesn't happen on the income tax. What is it, 150 million or something like that, taxpayers that pay income taxes, and almost doubles, a little more when you think about, what, 320 million people live in the country, and you probably have an influx of a couple of 3 million people that come in every year, maybe more. everybody gets to participate in creating that revenue that our government can operate off of. I can't imagine that they would not want to, that the bureaucracy would not want to change this.
All right, let me quote something from the book here real quick on page 92. Most Americans probably think that tax evaders are generally people who make their living outside the law, criminals, drug dealers, money launderers, prostitutes, and the like. The reality, you are probably playing the same game, and here's how. If your maid, gardener, home repairman, or house painter asks to be paid in cash, or is perhaps in our country illegally, and you cooperate, you are aiding in tax evasion. If you buy a hot dog from a vendor on the city streets, it's a pretty good bet you're doing cash business with someone who is not reporting all of his income. And it's just the system that we've got now. Just the basic design of the system is so fraud prone, so error prone. I mean, they're the loopholes in there. You could fly a 747 through them, and
Right.
the ways that you can avoid paying taxes. Actually, let me clear this term up. Tax avoidance, using the provisions of the law to pay as little as you can. That's okay. We're talking about tax evasion, not paying taxes that you legally owe. And if you legally owe money on taxes on the money that you make selling hot dogs, and you only report about half of it, then you're part of the problem. And again, every bit of this goes away with the fair tax, because it really doesn't matter how you make your money, legally, illegally, how much you make, where you get it from. None of that matters to the fair tax. When you buy something, make a retail purchase of a new product. Used products are not taxed under the fair tax. But if you buy something new at the store, or if you engage a service, your doctor, your dentist, your lawn maintenance person, anything like that, new goods and services are taxed under the fair tax. And again, however you make your money doesn't matter. If you buy stuff, you become a taxpayer under the fair tax. End of story.
Exactly. And we'll use the numbers from the FAIRtax book. A 2000 survey concluded that the shadow economy accounts for more than 10% of America's gross domestic product. And the major forces behind the shadow economy, taxes. More specifically, according to the study, the quote, increasing burden of taxation and Social Security payments combined with rising state regulatory activities and labor market restrictions, example, forced reduction in working hours. The Internal Revenue Service calls this figure the tax gap and concludes that it grows every year. This, of course, was a 2000 study, so it's 24 years ago, but the numbers may be different, but the concept and the understanding is the same. The IRS calls the figure the tax gap. Most recently, according to the 2000 survey, the Internal Revenue Service reported the figure at $355 billion in lost tax revenues.
Mm-hmm. Well, soon going a little bit farther here in this chapter, Charles Rosati, I hope that's how you pronounce his name, former commissioner of the IRS, and remember this book was written in 2005. He estimated that Americans avoided reporting almost $1.5 trillion in personal income, and that was in the year 1998. And this did not include undeclared earnings from criminal activity, because the IRS has no reliable data to use in estimating that. Of course, we know the criminal figures are astronomical. Can you imagine how much a single, I mean, your more successful drug dealers can bring in 10 figures, 10 figures. I was thinking 6 figures. Be nice to get 10, but I bet you can probably get 6 figures a year if you're just out buying that stuff. You've got customers that are desperate to buy from you, and when you've got in that particular situation, you can charge them whatever you want. But I'm not sure how we got off on that. But anyway, that is all here in Chapter 10, the underground and the offshore economy. We're not going to really have time to get in too much to the offshore economy, but there again are trillions, with a T, trillions of dollars hiding offshore in foreign banks that are there simply to avoid the taxation here in this country. And if we no longer tax, business transactions, we no longer tax capital and labor, like the fair tax does, taxing only retail consumption, those trillions of dollars would flow back into the economy. I remember with talking to, I think it was John Linder was saying, he talked Alan Greenspan one time. How long, asked Alan Greenspan, how long would it take that money to come back into the economy? And the Greenspan, just a few months is how long it would take for that money to come back and go to work in the American economy if we had the fair tax instead of our awful income tax system. Excuse
And
me.
that's I'll always talk about this on the program because I think it's real important. We are of a generation that knew no time where there was no income tax. So we think, oh, well, this is just the way to do it. The fair tax on consumption, specifically House Bill HR 25 is in Congress. It is possible that there will be activity on it. We hold out hope that there will be, but in the meantime, you, our listeners, and people that are watching the program on the various social media channels understand where we're at. We have to let everybody that we know understand. Tell 10 people to tell 10 people, and so on and so forth. But we as individuals probably don't remember a time where there was no income tax. So we think, well, this is all we have. And it isn't. And the fair tax is the answer to that.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt.
But we're about out of time here again on FAIRtax Power Radio. We are going through the original Bortz and Lender FAIRtax book, the white one. There's another one. They had a red one that came out later to answer some of the criticisms that people were making against FAIRtax. Maybe we'll go through that in one of these days. There are 16 chapters in this book. We're through chapter 10, so we're going to have at least a couple of 3 more FAIRtax Power Radio episodes to get to the end of the book. We hope you've enjoyed this. We again encourage everyone who does not have a copy of the FAIRtax book to get it. Read it for yourself. It's not a very long book. It's written in very entertaining fashion. It's a very entertaining read. And you might want to consider buying several copies so you can give them to your family and friends and check that out. But I say we're going to have to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Thank you again so much for watching, listening, and especially sharing the videos. Until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, providing you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
So tell me, how could I pay less taxes?
Less.
Yeah, I'm trying to get ahead, so how can I pay less?
Well, I suppose you could pay less taxes by earning less money, or you could give to charity.
How is that going to help?
Actually, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but if you know the right people, okay, or if you have a really good lawyer, you can usually get around the big ones.
If I may, under the fair tax, to pay less taxes, you would simply consume less. You would control how much you pay and when you pay your taxes simply by choosing what you purchase and when you purchase something.